Outer space is a vast expanse with countless unique worlds to explore, and in the year 3000, the human race knows this all too well. But it wasn't always this way. Hello everyone, and welcome back to my speculative storytelling series where I create a backstory and lore to a fantasy sci-fi universe set 1,000 years in the future. This story, unique from others, is set in a galactic map that is made to mirror the Milky Way 1-to-1, or if not perfectly, be as accurate as possible to what we know about space. And as such, many of the planets and moons are made to resemble what the real-life universe might hold. So far, I have 3 episodes detailing the lore that I've built for this fantasy universe. In this episode, I wanted to create a timeline cataloging all of the historical events between the real-life modern day and the in-story modern day of 3023, in order to bring fuller context to my existing and future episodes of this series. This is a full telling of the historical events that take place in this universe, a story of exploration, of geopolitical struggles, and contact with alien races. This is History of the Future. As a result of the space race between the Soviet Union and the United States, the first astronauts would walk on the moon in July of 1969. Even though the Cold War would end and the Soviet Union would fall, drastically diminishing the funds allocated to NASA, America's space agency, the momentum started by the monumental Apollo missions resulted in several rover missions to humanity's next target, Mars. The lack of funding and public interest only allowed for agencies like NASA to study space objects with machines like probes and telescopes. One of these orbital telescopes would be the JWST, which would launch at the beginning of the 2020s and discover the first ever Earth-like atmosphere around an exoplanet, Proxima Centauri 3. All of these groundbreaking discoveries fell on deaf ears, however, as the citizens of Earth had a vast array of their own challenges to deal with in the economic depression of the mid-2020s. This period of economic hardship was caused by a mixture of economic mismanagement and resource scarcity. To resolve the issue, the European Union proposes a unification of world nations into one singular nation that it calls the United Nations of Earth, in order to pool resources more effectively. This proposal is shot down by the world superpowers like the USA, Russia, and China. This prolonged period of economic division makes it even more difficult for organizations like NASA to attain funding, and as such, responsibility for advancements in this field fall on private industries. Small asteroid mining projects in the mid-century make the industry profitable as the result of higher amounts of resources returning to Earth. The economic strain on the everyday person begins to lessen. As a collaborative effort between NASA, the ESA, and several private companies, exactly 100 years to the day since the Apollo 11 mission landed on the moon, humans walked across the surface yet again, but this time to stay. As it was found to be a far more cost-effective way to launch missions from the moon rather than from Earth, the moon-based Tranquility became the first extraterrestrial colony. Later down the line, in 2091 and 92, the first ever humans would set foot on the Red Planet and make a temporary base on Mars for a short period of time. After the turn of the century, returning missions to Mars reveal a far higher concentration of valuable resources in its crust than previously predicted, and as a result, the first Martian colonies are founded in 2139. In the mid-2150s and 60s, with the financial boom that results from the space mining industry, several scientific missions are sent to the outer solar system. One of these missions sends a rover diver into the subterranean ocean of Europa. While there, the probe uncovered evidence that life may have once existed on the moon of Jupiter, as organic compounds exist under the ice here that aren't known to form naturally. This groundbreaking discovery cements interest in space exploration thoroughly back into the minds of the masses. A second groundbreaking discovery would come in the year 2171, with the discovery and manipulation of the graviton, and the new invention of artificial gravity sees applications in almost every facet of society. Between 2177 and 2180, as a result of the rising political tensions in the United States, a civil war breaks out that eventually tears the nation apart. In 2199, no longer opposed by the main world superpower, the EU forms the single nation of the UNE. A huge number of nations join as nation-states. The UNE's main opposer becomes Russia, whose leaders are critical of the UNE's centralization of power. In 2245, the gas mining company Hydroco is founded, and using an artificial gravity-powered mining rig, they set up a station in the skies of Jupiter. They become a leading provider in starship fuel in the following decades. As a result of the increased traffic to Jupiter's remote system, a port town was set up on the relatively stable moon of Ganymede. This port would go on to become known as the Hydroco towns, which would by 2275 come to gain representation as a territory in the UNE under the state of Great Britain. This further raised tensions with Russia, but was let pass on a technicality. This event would spur on Olympia, a previously American colony, to apply for representation in the UNE Senate. After being denied several times in the past 50 years, Olympia, who was still obligated to pay taxes to the UNE, as they were gaining financial assistance from them, declared its independence. This started a chain reaction of other Martian colonies declaring their independence against their founding countries. This is what started the Martian War for Independence. During this war, starcraft technology exploded, the innovation of both starfighters and capital cruisers. The UNE's main shipbuilding company, Lunar Shipworks, was founded in the City of Tranquility. Alongside those developments, weapons of mass destruction were developed by UNE scientists as a superiority play, and were never truly made to be used, until they were. After Martian freedom fighters took the UNE's main city of Hesperia, the UNE threatened and eventually did use a gravity well driver to pull in one of Mars's moons, Phobos, into the planet, crashing into Hesperia and killing everyone in the city. As a result of this heinous event, the UNE lost most of its support for the war, and as such, the war ended, with the independent colonies on Mars gaining their freedom. The ending of the Martian War in the turn of the 24th century saw the beginning of what came to be known as the Golden Age of the solar system. This time period became synonymous with leisure and travel throughout the solar system for fun. Piggybacking on the star cruiser technology invented during the war, many travel companies invented cruise ships that could travel between worlds and allow for vacationers to take trips to places like the Jovian moons or the rings of Saturn. The boom in space travel is what pushes the UNE to build the first of many orbital spaceports to relieve the traffic to ground-based spaceports. The climate and environmental changes that brought scarcity in the 21st century began to make problems for the 24th century, as coastal cities like London, Tokyo, and New York began to flood, and their population begins to immigrate further inland. Within 200 years from this point in history, these cities would be entirely submerged beneath the waves. As a result of the invention in the NLS engine, an engine put in a starship that is able to achieve 20% of the speed of light, theoretically allows for travel between Earth and Proxima Centauri to take 20 years. As a result, UNE scientists begin planning a mission to the Alpha Centauri system. This mission would eventually see the light of day after the turn of the century in 2402. In that same year, Dr. Helena Blanco would test her experimental FTL engine, a faster-than-light engine. The brilliant physicist, with funding from the UNE military, would invent what was an engine that functionally acted as an artificial wormhole to allow for near-instant travel between 2 points in space at faster than the speed of light would allow. The test flight would launch from the Sunspot station on December 2nd of 2402 and see Private Hans Blanco activate the FTL engine, and in a streak of light, disappear forever. Dr. Blanco gave up the project shortly afterward, losing both her life's work and her son, the test pilot, in the same day. She retired, a broken woman. At the end of the year, China and Russia, struggling to keep up with the power of the UNE, formed their own alliance to restore global independence, ATRI. This would slowly heighten political tensions between the two sides. As a result, years later in 2418, ATRI extremists launched an attack on the link station that would be taken as an act of war by the UNE, and thus began World War III. 6 years later, Earth finally received word that the Alpha Centauri mission was a partial success. The They had landed on the planet and colonized its surface, however the environment was far more harsh than previously expected. The UNE, pouring all of its resources into the war against Russia, was unable to help the colony as they inevitably asked for aid in the form of supplies and manpower. As a result of the mismanagement of the colonies grew frustrated and decided to cut off contact with Earth, surviving on their own in their new isolated sect of humanity, known as the People's Republic of Alpha Centauri. With no way to get to them, there was little the UNE could do to prevent their newfound independence. Years into the war, in 2456, famed physicist and youngest son of the original inventor of the FTL gate, Dr. Victor Blanco, reinvented his mother's technology with one fix that he thought would make it work. Since Einstein had theorized that moving people at or above the speed of light would cause them to experience time differently than observers outside the craft, he theorized that his brother did not die, but was simply still moving through space somewhere out there, still only moments after launch from his perspective. This theory resulted in the invention of the relativity compensator, which, as the name implies, compensates for the time dilation experienced by the relativity effect, making his mother's FTL wormhole a possibility. 2 years later, Victor would find himself boarding a train to present his invention to the UNE to fund the building of a Stargate. But just after boarding the train at 9:14 a.m., he was captured and killed by 2 Atri agents, taking his secret of the invention to the grave. Another devastating casualty of the war. Just before the turn of the century, a rebellion would occur after an organization that called itself the New United Nations of Earth uncovered and released to the public irrefutable evidence that corruption in the UNE and Atri had actually caused both countries to prolong the war, as both sides were benefiting from war profiteering, functionally allying against their own people so that their leaders could become rich. This rebellion sees the militaries of the UNE and Atri turn on their respective leaders, effectively ending the war and reuniting Earth's people against their shadowy oppressors. Years later, Earth, as well as the Moon, Ganymede, and parts of Mars, are officially united into one nation with a transparent governmental process and a rigid constitution, the new United Nations of Earth. In 2530, after solving the disappearance of her grandfather Victor Blanco, college student Helena Andros reinvented her grandfather's device, a faster-than-light wormhole. The invention of FTL technology had ripple effects in the industry, causing improvements in the NLS engine. It could see ships reach almost 99.99% the speed of light unaided. This would theoretically reduce travel time between Earth and Proxima Centauri to a mere 4.5 years. The plan then, as it were, would be to build one of these FTL gates out beyond Neptune, which pointed in the direction of Alpha Centauri. And while the first gate was being built, a second-generation ship would cross the 4-year real space gap. The inhabitants of this generation ship would build the second gate while on their way and activate it when they arrived in the Alpha Centauri system, forever connecting the 2 star systems through space-time. After a pooling of the resources of the world and gathering the manpower, the mission finally comes to launch from Earth in 2618, landing in the Alpha Centauri system as the gate opens in 2621. After opening the gate and attempting to re-establish contact with the People's Republic of Alpha Centauri, a war begins. As the people of this world, now called Proxy by its inhabitants, have become isolationist and extreme in the centuries since what they see as their abandonment by Earth. The Centauri Wars lasts for 15 years, but only the first 9 see any fighting, as the final years cool down to a Cold War situation. Finally, in 2634, a loyalist rebellion occurs in Proxy's capital of New Alexandria, which eventually results in the reunification of the 2 civilizations. Diplomacy winning the day, the 2 civilizations with new, faster-than-light technology decide to branch out into the cosmos and explore and exploit whatever vast new worlds the universe had to offer. In 2637, new missions would launch to connect the star systems in the local bubble, and civilization only exponentially expanded from there. The first new system would be opened 8 years later in the form of the Sirius star system, and the desert moon Depar that was found there saw minor colonization occur. That ended up not being amongst the most notable discoveries of the decade, however. Those would all happen 1 year after the other during the next 3 years. The search for life was finally beginning to come to an end. In 2146, in the recently reached Epsilon Eridani system, explorers would find what appeared to be the 20,000-year-old remains of a civilization that once called the terrestrial planet Ra home. The extinction of the Ran civilization, as it would come to be known, would be one of the biggest mysteries of all time, as even though these structures were undoubtedly made by some technologically advanced species, there was no fossil record on the planet to speak of. A year later, not only would 3 star systems open up to the explorers of humanity, but one of them, the Epsilon Indi system, would harbor a very special surprise. On a moon in this system, the first non-Earth life was discovered on the surface of another world. The discovery did not come in a very exciting form, but in microbial life that existed on its surface, and a red-purple moss-like organism that stretched across the lowlands of the moon. In that same year, Earth's population would hit 1 trillion, another unfortunate but inevitable chapter in the overcrowding of the planet Earth. Its surface, changed by years and years of continental shift and climate change, had also changed as the urban creep saw a vast cityscape cover 90% of the Earth's surface. With less than 0.01% of humanity living off-world, this event would prime humanity for the next and final discovery in the search of life. On New Year's Day in 2649, the 9-planet star system of Tau Ceti was discovered, and the 4th planet from the star would become one of the most famous planets in all of history. This 4th planet would come to be called Terra Tau, and it resembled a prehistoric natural Earth, with a nitrogen and oxygen breathable atmosphere, a near identical surface gravity, and a diverse ecosphere of its own complex life forms. This true Earth analog would see the first mass exodus of Earth. The years following would see a continuous push outward into the cosmos, but no discoveries, including the discoveries of the important planets like Caspian's planet and Vol, would rival that of Terra Tau, until 2677, when humanity reached the TRAPPIST system. On a terrestrial world in the TRAPPIST system, humanity had first contact with an intelligent species. The Pistians, as we would come to call them, were a remarkably similar species to humanity, all things considered, and as they were in the throes of an age similar to Earth's Renaissance, these Pistians would delight in the technology that humans brought them from Earth, and many of Pisti's inhabitants would leave their homeworld for life amongst the humans of the NUNE. The two species seemed to be destined for great horizons together, as the future looked bright, until it didn't. Over the course of 4 years since first contact, the rapid gain of technology mixed with the transmutable diseases from humanity caused the geopolitical landscape of Pisti to buckle, and through the series of wars that resulted, the Pistians made their planet uninhabitable, wiping most of themselves out. It was theorized by human scientists that our contacting of the species and their subsequent introduction to diseases and technologies that their culture had not evolved to deal with was the root cause of the events that would lead to their near extinction. This event would come to be known as the Trappist tragedy, and it would come to inspire the Trappist Bill of 2682. The Trappist Bill was a law put into place that forbade humanity from contacting any species that seems to have a shot at intelligence, and contact would not be permissible unless that species had colonized 2 or more planets. The Trappist tragedy would be the first domino in the cascading effect that would lead to a civil war in the NUNE. Caused by many events, but mainly an uneven distribution of power, the, quote, outlying systems of the year 2699 would seek a more balanced representation in the Senate, as an uneven distribution of the representation of humanity's colonized worlds saw voting power mainly lie in the central worlds like Earth, Proxy, and Terra Tau. The war lasted for a short duration compared to many other wars, but in an effort to reunify human space, this resulted in the NUNE's heavy reorganization into the galactically minded United Star Systems of Earth in 2703. After the founding of the USSE, a second golden age seemed to occur as humanity would go on to push further out, exploring the many reaches of the cosmos. 98 years after the foundation of the USSE and the reaches of the newly discovered Altenian system, humanity would make first contact with an equally as advanced alien race. How did first contact go? Well, as good as you might expect. It is theorized that a communication barrier between the two species caused increased tensions on the two craft, and it is unknown who fired the first shot. But 2 days after first contact, we were officially at war for the first time with an interstellar force. This race calls themselves a word that is unpronounceable by humans, but closely mirrors the word Chikta-Qatar. Humans would eventually come to know them as the Qatarians. The Qatarians were a race of carbon-based intelligent organisms who had a governing system similar to the feudal systems of an ancient Earth. Their culture was a warlike one, with the beings of the species being prided for their combat strength, similar to Earth humans in many ways. Their homeworld is a mystery to humanity, as neither race has ever reached the other's homeworld. These discoveries of the complexities of the Qatarian race would not be uncovered until years later, and all throughout the war, humans saw the Qatarians in a highly xenophobic light, seeing them as nothing but a barbarian people who sought conflict wherever they went. The relatively even match of the two species saw a wartime naval gridlock, which is the environment that the Delonians would step, or more accurately, swim into. As it was 37 years after the start of the war, human beings encountered a second intelligent race in the Yid-Prior system, the Delonians. What at first was seen as another interstellar threat was soon discovered to be a remarkably intelligent species that was far more advanced than humanity. The Delonians were most equitable to Earth's cephalopods in their looks, but only barely. They were thought to have evolved millions of years before humanity did on an oceanic superworld in the Nunki system. And they did not communicate verbally, like the Qatar and the humans did, but with bioluminescent sacs that adorned their skin. As a quirk of their evolutionary biology, the Delonians' DNA differs from ours in the way that it wraps continuously back onto itself, nullifying the need for structures like telomeres. As such, these creatures do not age or become elderly, and as a side effect of their biological immortality, the concept of time does not exist in their culture. This is what causes this race to be unknowingly patient. Through machines, we learned to communicate with the Delonians. Through this, we soon discover, through our peace with the Delonians, that they knew of the Qatar and were at peace with them as well, something originally thought by humanity to be impossible. 2 years after first contact, the first Delonian came to Earth, and later in that year the Delonians would gather the human and Qatarian leaders in the Yid-Prior system for peace talks. In the year 2842, after 2 years of peace talks led by the slow-acting Delonians, the Qatarian wars would end, bringing peace once again. As a result of the peace accords, the Qatarians would gain computing technology from humans, and humans would gain the technologies of terraformation. These secrets were ordered to be exchanged by the Delonians as a show of goodwill between the races. And as such, a few years later, the terraformation of Mars as a first test run of the reverse-engineered technology began. Another effect of the peace treaty was that humans began to assist the Delonians in the building of jump gates to connect their empire, as the Delonians had never had the need to achieve faster-than-light travel on their own. In return, the Delonians promised humanity a portion of space beyond their own territory that humanity would once colonize in the future. In 2843, the discovery of a habitable gas giant in the Spica system, named Makana's planet, saw the gas mining company Hydroco finally collapse, as it had been holding on by a string for years through competition with new gas, and simply could not compete with the competition of a second superpower and Millennium Starship fuel providers, SFP. Spica would also draw tourists to the system, as the life in the skies of Makana's planet seemed to be remarkably similar to the biosphere of Earth's oceans. Millennium SFP was named after the Millennium whale that could be found in the skies of this planet. 50 years after the process began, the terraformation of Mars concluded in 2896. As a result, a mass terraformation project begins to give near-Earth-like worlds the technology that would improve quality of life throughout human space. In 2911, a third intelligent species is contacted. They are known as the Tahal. The Tahal are a remarkably similar to human race through their biological processes, culture, and governing structures. As such, through humanity's sobering experience with the Pistians and Catarians, first contact is properly made and the two species become closest intertwined of all the races. In the modern day, both humans and the Tahal move freely throughout each other's space for both business and pleasure. In 2943, together with the Tahal as our interstellar companions, the race known as the Silidectal are discovered, and they are the most alien to date. The Silidectals are a silicon-based race of organisms that communicates through inorganic pheromones and verbal frequencies far below human hearing range. As such, these eerie creatures and their vast differences between them and the other races of the Milky Way galaxy cause an insurmountable communication barrier, leaving much of what life is like for the Silidectals a mystery. It is, however, theorized that their homeworld orbits the star Tarf, deep in Silidectal space. In 2950, the Delonian Gate project is finished and the exploration of humanity's new colony systems begins. The exploration and terraformation of these planets still goes on to the modern day. This chapter in history leads us up to the very recent events. In the 2980s, the Delonians, who would have the most success in communicating with the Silidectals, relay a message to the USE Tahal and the Qatar, that the Silidectals say that they have come under attack and are at war with a mysterious threat. This threat is a new race that the Silidectals call a word that vaguely translates to a Vex. In 2297, these same reports begin to pour out of Qatarian space, which leads to our first contact with the Vex in the Georgia Terta system in the year 2999. The Vex are a bizarre species that appears to be a non-naturally occurring organism. However, it is unknown if they are truly engineered or if their natural biology simply differs that much from humans. Any individual Vex drone, although highly dangerous, doesn't appear to be remarkably intelligent on their own. In the massive swarms that these individuals make up is where their intelligence really shines. These swarms appear to act like a human-like brain, thinking using the communication of their individuals, similar to the neurons of a brain. In a highly simplified observation, they appear to be a hive mind race, with similar behavior to the viruses of Earth. Their simple goal appears to be to invade every planet they come across, wiping out life on each one in the process. As such, the Vex War begins. The most recent notable event in history is the 3013 peace treaty between the Qatar and humans, allying them against this great threat, and allowing for civilian and military craft to freely move across a designated portion of each other's war-affected space. These events bring us to the modern day of 3023. In the modern day of 3023, life in the USSE is diverse in a number of ways. Many families that once called the northern reaches of the USSE their home now flee along the spaceways towards the safer core in search of asylum. While life in the core worlds in the southern reaches by Tahal's space is built up and relatively comfortable, if not a little stressful with the constant news threat of the war. While life in the colony systems is relatively detached and suits those looking for a simpler, more solitary way of life out on the last frontier. Of course, these events are simply the broad strokes of the true story, and the finer details of this world will have to be left to another day. Originally, when I was planning out this episode, I wanted to also create some more concept art for the human race, and what their technology, clothing, food, buildings, and more would look like during the year 3023. I've started working on such a video as I realized it would be far too long to fit in this one, but I quickly realized that video would be very long in and of itself, and would be loaded with concept art, which I don't want to rush, so we'll be doing that at some point. But for the next few months, I'll be creating concept art based around the locations and alien creatures that exist in the central USSE, going one star system at a time. Speaking of the concept art that I created for this video, you can find each digital painting in high-quality free downloadable versions on my DeviantArt. Any art that doesn't appear on screen I didn't produce and therefore I do not own. And of course that goes for any video clips in this video, as I ain't a 3D animator either. My other social medias are also linked in the description. Those would be my Instagram, where I sometimes post my art, but more importantly, where you can contact me, I have a Discord where you can join and become a part of a super creative community. Right now, if you get on before the end of the month, you can participate in my Pokemon contest where you can submit your own design to have a chance of me redrawing those Pokemon in my own art style at the beginning of February. Yeah, there's only a few days left in this month, but I thought I'd let you know. I also have a Patreon where for as low as $5 a month, you can help support this channel and get these videos 2 days before everyone else. For those of you who have been waiting the 3 weeks since I posted my last video, thank you so much for watching. Getting this video made was an absolute nightmare. I first got sick with strep throat and wasn't able to record audio because I lost my voice, and then the power went out for days in the ice storm because I live in New England, and then probably due to stress, I developed an abscess in the roof of my mouth that made it very painful to talk and eat. The whole time trying to balance this nightmare with working full-time. On top of that, the original video that was over an hour long and took me the first 2 weeks to make got corrupted at some point, and the editing software deleted the file. So, yeah, the production of this video could have been an entire video of its own. It's been a crazy month. But what I'm trying to say is, thank you all so much for your patience, and for 2,000 subscribers. It means the world. Speaking of thanks, thank you for watching. If you like this video and want to see more like it, then subscribe, and turn on the bell to get notified when I upload next.